The screen was glowing brightly in the gloomy room with no source of light apart from it, measuring about 24 inches in length. It was a 16:9 aspect ratio monitor with its native resolution, displaying social media content with pictures and reviews online. A teenager was typing on his keyboard as his taps were getting aggressive and faster every second. The teenager was simply staring and was completely consumed by social media addiction, and it was almost his entire world. On the screen, he was typing something about a fair, middle-aged woman who was also a model. The teenager had no morals and was simply spreading toxicity over the model, as he was posting derogatory comments about her skills and about how she would be a product of nepotism with no talent at all. Just as he posted the comment about the model, he swiftly shifted to another page where there were a lot of cars online, with ratings and reviews. He posted a false review about owning a Mercedes C63 and even praised the German car brands for their top-tier quality, and even defamed Maserati and Bentley, portraying himself as a rich person online. Every time he typed reviews, he posted them without even thinking twice, filling his whole mind with a world of distorted desires. Even though it was broad daylight, there was not even a single light source from outside as his room was completely dark and screens were on to prevent sunlight from entering his house. There was only a single source of sunlight throughout the entire room, which was from his screen, until the teenager received a notification on his mobile phone. But the teenager was totally disappointed right after seeing the notification that he received. He held his mobile phone with his hand, which was scratched and cut all over near the veins, showing his suicidal attempts, and was simply glaring at the notification that he received from his mother. The cuts were deep through his skin, as it showed his will not to live in the world, and he actually tried to end his own life. The notification he got was from his mother, as she was asking the teenager if he was really not going. But he threw his phone away as soon as he saw the message from his mother, and he was not happy about the vacation. But his mother was right behind the door when she texted him through his mobile phone. But she was reluctant to knock on the door, as she was very considerate about not disturbing her son. She did not know how to deal with her own son, and she remained silent as she stood still outside his door. She even asked him to step out of his gloomy room and get some fresh air for a change, as it would help him brighten his mood. She was worried about him, as it had been so long since he left his room. She even told him that it might be the last family trip before his father leaves on business again, but he was adamant that he would not come on the trip. His mother was disheartened as he yelled at her for talking to him, even after telling her not to talk to him anymore, and he even told her that he hated hearing her voice. The heartbroken mother was simply standing next to the door, without breaking her silence. She quickly took out her mobile phone and started to text someone regarding the situation. But the teenager did not bother and continued to text and post reviews online. But he was more frustrated about the encounter with his mother. But after some time, he switched to a first-person shooter video game where he was frustrated about his team and his gameplay. While he was completely focused on the video game, he received a notification on his mobile, alerting him to the presence of some professional players at his party, and he realized he was going to lose the match. It was his mother who sent a message saying they would take their leave and also told him to take care of the house and himself, and not to skip his meals. The family got into their car, and the tires screeched as they entered the highway. The lane had no divider between the traversing vehicles, as it was a regular highway that would conjoin with a bigger highway. The father was so furious about the teenager, Hyun, as he was still in his room, and he was playing video games and spending most of his time in front of the screen. Meanwhile, the mother remained silent as she did not know how to respond to her husband, while Hyun's sister was sitting in the back with her mobile phone in her hands. Hyun's father was worried about his son, as he was turning into one of those hikikomori, a recluse. He even blamed his wife, Hyun's mother, for not disciplining him and letting him behave like that. But Hyun's sister stepped in and defended her mom, saying it was not her fault at all. Her father was not having it, and yelled at her daughter for joining the rebellion, and even told her that the house would become a fine mess whenever he was away, even for just a bit. Hyun's sister continued to defend her mother as she said it was his fault too for not being home more often, and asked him if he was feeling responsible for Hyun. Hyun's father was frustrated after hearing her, as he was worried that if that was all he was going to get for sacrificing for the family in order to provide food for them. Hyun's mom stepped in, as she did not want anyone to ruin the vacation vibes, and tried to distract the whole family. But the father was still furious about all the comments and continued to yell that it was all his fault. Just as they were traveling, there was an 8-wheeler truck traveling on the opposite lane. But the truck was speeding abnormally as it was already exceeding the speed limit of that particular road. The driver of the truck passed out, with blood leaking through his nose and his mouth, as he slowly started to lose control of his vehicle. Meanwhile, the mother was trying to distract the whole family and was trying to lighten up the mood by cheering and pouring tea for the family. Hyun's sister also realized that she was harsh towards her father and apologized for poking him with harsh words and trying to blame everything on him. The truck was destabilizing and was out of its lane as the driver completely lost control of the steering wheel. But in the car, the father also diverted his focus towards his daughter and apologized for yelling at the family and told them that he could not stop himself from getting angry whenever he saw Hyun. But it was already too late. The truck was right in front of the car as the father was completely clueless about her daughter's shock. The father turned around to see what was going on, but all he could see was a huge metal truck right in front of his whole family. The whole family was too stunned to react and could not even process what was going on. The truck's headlights shone brightly upon the family as it came so close to the vehicle, but nothing could be done. Hyun's mobile phone suddenly rang, with no saved number in it, and it was an anonymous one as well. But Hyun was sleeping soundly after being exhausted from his gaming session. His phone continued to vibrate, but he was not bothered by it at all. Just as his phone vibrated, he extended his arm and tried to reach for his mobile phone. After swinging his arms for a few seconds, he finally took his mobile phone and suppressed the vibration. He took the mobile phone and realized it was an anonymous phone call. He thought it might be some promotional call, or it might be a call bomb, and he cut the call and continued to sleep. But within moments, his mobile phone rang again, causing vibrations near him. Hyun was getting frustrated by this fact, and he tried to ignore the phone call and to sleep. But he could not stand it anymore, and he woke up from his bed and was furious about the phone call. He was frustrated about the phone call as the person kept calling in the middle of his sleep. But the speaker's end of the phone call verified his family members and their names, and asked if they were talking with Hyun. His eyes and his heartbeat froze after hearing the devastating news about his family. The 18-year-old high school student was completely shocked and could not utter any words. Hyun Cha, a social recluse, was totally confused and wondered if it was a prank or not. But he realized they were telling the truth, and he dropped his mobile phone onto his bed. His entire room was completely devoid of sunlight, and now it was completely filled with negative energy, as he already had a history of self-harm and was also reluctant to go to school. But within moments, he lost his family, and he was all alone for the rest of his life. Days passed, and it was a bright day with a cloudy sky. The entire city was serene and was busy, as everyone was minding their own business, keeping the city completely alive and bustling. In this city, there was a building called Green Home. Nearby this building, there was a lawn, and the gardener was trimming the extra grass over the lawn with his lawnmower. Hyun Cha was walking past Green Home, and he was walking right beside the lawn. His mind was completely devoid of thoughts, and he was walking towards his destination. But just as he was walking, the lawnmower suddenly hit a stone on the ground, and the blade broke upon the impact with the stone. The blade quickly flies past Hyun Cha, nearly missing him, as it could have been more fatal if it had actually hit him. But Hyun Cha showed no sudden movements, as it moved so fast. He took a look at what was flying beside him and saw it was a piece of the lawnmower's cutting blade. Hyun Cha was surprised by the sudden appearance of this blade and showed no sudden movements. The gardener came rushing towards Hyun Cha, and he checked on him. He even apologized, knowing that it could have been a disaster. The gardener was surprised by how powerful this machinery could be. But Hyun Cha did not utter any words, as his head was filled with other thoughts, and he simply stared at the gardener. Hyun Cha was actually heading to the Green Home, a huge apartment with multiple floors and rooms within the building. The gardener apologized once again, and he later revealed that he was actually the security guard of the building, and no one treats them with respect since they do most of the work. But Hyun Cha remained silent, and this questioned the guard's actions. But the security guard was more intrigued by his presence near the Green Home apartment, as he had never seen him around before. But Hyun Cha was still silent, and there was a moment of awkwardness between him and the security guard. Hyun Cha later revealed that he moved to this place very recently, but he said it was barely any louder. The security guard just understood that the boy was murmuring something, but it was not quite audible, and he asked Hyun Cha what he was saying. Hyun Cha gathered his courage and tried to overcome his social reclusivity by talking a little louder than he did before, and told the security guard that he moved here recently. The security guard realized that it was him who was moving to room number 1410, and he even asked if he lived there alone. But his reclusivity took over, and he mumbled that he lives there alone. It was not at all audible for the security guard, as he asked Hyun Cha to repeat whatever he was mumbling, a little louder. Hyun Cha said he was alone. The security guard did not know what to say, as he noticed a sense of grief that Hyun Cha held when he said that he moved in alone and was going to live alone. Hyun-cha was completely filled with sorrow, and he was depressed about what happened to his parents. But the security guard was skeptical, as he was too young to move out of his family's place on his own. But he understood everyone has their own circumstances, and he asked Hyun-cha when all of his stuff would be coming. Hyun was still socially awkward, as he told the security guard that it would come by afternoon. The security guard listened and asked if he could stop by his office that evening, as he needed to discuss a few things about living there. Hyun-cha agreed, and he continued to walk away from the security guard, and he headed towards his room. The guard was wondering about him and why he was so socially awkward, and in the meantime, he realized something was leaking from his nose. He wiped it off with his hands and was surprised. The security guard noticed that it was blood leaking through his nose as he held onto the broken blade from the lawnmower. The main entrance of the green home apartment has a huge double door with glass panes covering the sides. The apartment has 2 elevators with properly functioning switches. Each floor consisted of high ceilings and properly mounted concrete. Along with that, each floor has its own fire alarm system in order to prevent fire outbreaks on the floor. He then enters his room, room number 1410, which also has a spy hole mounted on the door. He enters his room and shuts the door as he places his belongings down on the ground. Hyun-cha simply stared outside the window as he continued to observe the city from a distance in his rugged clothes. He observed a tall apartment in the middle of the city with a lot of small buildings nearby, while the entirety was surrounded by the lush green mountains. Hyun-cha was staring at this scenario for some time, as his mind was completely empty, and he was still trying to process his situation. But his primary concern was not about the death of his mother, father, or even his sister, but it was about the place in which he was residing, which was in the middle of nowhere and on the outskirts of his town. He then quickly slides the screen over the window, blocking the sunlight from entering his room, with only a part of it being open. Hyun-cha was completely tired and exhausted, and he took a seat on the floor, with the wall as his support to lean on. He realized his situation was more pathetic than he thought it would be. The sorrow quickly caught up to his mind as he tried to process how the funeral actually went. The relatives and the guests who attended the funeral placed their flowers and offerings for the deceased as they were discussing how young his sister was and how successful his father was. But everyone was completely pissed by Hyun-cha's behavior, as he was missing out on his family's funeral, and they wondered what could be more important than attending his family's ritual. Some guests and relatives even tried to call him, but he never answered their calls. While some were wondering if he actually knew about his parents' demise, some were just furious about his actions, as his parents were worried about him all their lives, and now as well. But they saw someone enter the funeral hall with their sandals on. The relatives and the guests were completely stunned as they saw a familiar face enter the funeral hall. It was Hyun-cha who entered the hall, walking past all those relatives and the guests. While he continued to walk past them, the guests were completely stunned to speak, as he was still in his shabby clothes, even while attending his own family's funeral. One of the guests even tried to build a conversation with him, as he told Hyun that they were quite surprised by his appearance. But Hyun did not bother himself with all the conversations they tried to initiate, and he continued to walk towards his family's offerings and their pictures. While he went near their pictures and altars, the relatives and guests noticed that he was wearing sandals in memory of his own family's demise. But he was not bothered about any of the comments that were made about him and his family, as he only said he checked. But the family relatives and the guests were silent and surprised at what he was talking about. Hyun-cha said that he did not feel like coming to the funeral, but it was unbelievable for him as well. As he was talking, his hands reached out to his pocket and he took a bunch of small notebooks from his pocket. But before he could take it out completely, it fell onto the ground. The notebooks were actually bank account statements and checkbooks of his family, which had 3 accounts, with a combined sum of $20,000. Hyun-cha's eyes expressed no sadness or remorse, and he turned around and asked how it would be sufficient for him to live his life with only $20,000. Every single one of the relatives and the guests was completely shocked by his behavior and was totally disgusted by Hyun-cha's cheap actions. But Hyun-cha was pissed off and yelled at the relatives and the guests, asking how it would be sufficient to take care of himself for the rest of his life. This angered the relatives who came to pay and show respect for the deceased's family. The furious relatives and guests gathered near Hyun-cha and decided to remove him from the funeral hall, as they had had enough of disrespect. They yanked Hyun-cha by the hoodie part of his jacket. Everyone held on to Hyun-cha's legs and his arms as they were trying to take him away from the hall. But he refused to get out and yelled at them for resisting him. One relative even punched him hard in the face, which almost knocked him out. They dragged him out, threw him out, and yelled at him not to set foot into the funeral hall again. They even threw all the checkbooks and bank statements that he was carrying. Before he could even stand up, they closed the door right in front of him. He was completely enraged by this gesture from his relatives and the guests. But there was another boy who was sitting quietly and was observing everything Hyun-cha was going through. The boy who was observing was also Hyun-cha, as he was just thinking and reliving the memory that he experienced a few days back. His eyes were drowned in sorrow and disappointment as he continued to relive what he went through. He was disappointed in himself. After being kicked out of his own parents' and sister's funeral, he quickly started to calculate the daily expenses and assumed that he would spend $30 a day. He analyzed that it would cost around $10,800 for his expenditure for a year, excluding internet, food, gas, and water. But when he tried to calculate his entire expenditure, he could not keep track of all the microtransactions that would take place over the course of time. And he was frustrated, and he threw the book down out of anger. Meanwhile, Hyun-cha was cursing himself over the memory of himself. Hyun-cha thought of selling the house for more money. He realized it would be a pain in the neck to sell it, and he thought of moving to a studio to reduce the expenditures. He was quickly analyzing every possible means to survive in the world, and as he was thinking, his body suddenly started to shiver. But the one who was going through the memory could not hold sight of the scene as it was getting out of hand. Hyun-cha finally broke down in tears, knowing how desperate he was to survive, after his parents and his sister had passed. He sat on the floor with his mood completely depressed, and he realized he was desperate to live despite his numerous attempts to kill himself. The wind swept through his screen as a minimal amount of sunlight entered the house. The light shone upon Hyun-cha's face, but it only brightened the room and not his mind. He looked out the window through the gap and he finally formed a thought. He asked himself if he should kill himself, saving the hassle of surviving in the world. He quickly pulled out his mobile phone from his pocket. As the kitchen was partially arranged with plates and a cooker, it was yet to be arranged completely, and Hyun-cha was texting something in the meantime. He opened the calendar and searched for a proper date through the calendar. He found the 25th of October to be the perfect date. With his nails not properly groomed, he started to type something on the 25th of October, labeling something on that day. He was reluctant to even type, as he gave spaces between every two letters. He realized it would be of no point for him to live in the world with his mother, father, and sister gone from the world. He finally typed suicide, with all the hesitation in his mind, marking his end on that particular day. He updated it on his calendar. The sun set upon the lush green valley as the buildings in the city started to shift the mood from bustling to resting. Hyun-cha's belongings had arrived with everything packed in cardboard boxes as he made a phone call to someone and asked them when they would arrive. But the receiver answered that it would be so late, and this enraged Hyun-cha, and he asked why it would be that late. He cut the call out of frustration and threw his phone on the ground as they said it would arrive the next day. Hyun-cha was visibly pissed off, as he could not survive without the internet, and he wondered how he was going to pass an entire day without it. He started to unpack a few cardboard boxes as he rummaged only for the electronics from his cardboard boxes. Hyun-cha quickly arranged his CPU and his monitor as he placed his monitor over another cardboard box, making it a stand for his desktop. He made all the wiring and connected everything, and he plugged in the main plug to the switch outlet. He turned the switch and pressed the power button, hoping he assembled everything perfectly. Just as he pressed the power button on the CPU, the cooling fan started to spin, making a whirring noise over his new house. The Windows 10 screen popped up as he logged into his user account. But even though the computer works fine and perfectly, Hyun-cha could not find a proper network port, as his internet plan would arrive the next day, leaving him without Wi-Fi. Hyun-cha was completely disappointed and didn't know what to do as he continued to be silent. He let out a big sigh, and he lay down on the floor even after assembling his keyboard and mouse for a gaming session. Hyun-cha's head was completely filled with emptiness, as he could not process his situation, and he could not process his future anymore. He simply stared at the ceiling, and he continued to stare at the lighting over the ceiling. But something else caught his attention while he was staring at the ceiling of his house. He noticed a small insect that was crawling next to the ceiling light. Hyun-cha continued to observe the insect and tried to figure out what it would be. It was a small spider which was crawling across the ceiling, moving slowly and steadily. He did not like the situation he was in, but a deep and ominous voice rang through his head as it asked him what he was going to do about it. Hyun-cha was completely stunned and unable to speak or to react as it was so sudden. The spider vanished within a moment, making the ceiling completely empty, and he could not spot it anymore. He jumped out of the floor as he was scared about what was going on. He slowly turned back to check if there were any intruders who had broken into his house. But he found no one in the kitchen area as well, as the house was totally empty and the only resident at that moment was Hyun-cha himself. He was completely flustered about what was going on and he tried to process what exactly happened. But suddenly someone rang the calling bell as the camera feed suggested someone was at the door. Hyun-cha quickly gathered his sanity and wondered who was at the door. He noticed that it was the same security guard whom he had met in the morning during their encounter when the lawnmower's blade snapped. He opened the door with a creaky noise. Hyun-cha was still suspicious about the security guard, and he asked what it was about. The security guard reminded him about telling Hyun-cha to meet him by his office in the evening. But as he was speaking, Hyun-cha noticed that the security guard plugged his nose with cotton, which had been bleeding earlier that day. Hyun-cha was feeling reclusive as he asked what it was about and wanted to end the conversation as quickly as possible. The security guard later revealed that there was a legal problem with the construction company because of some bad maintenance, and he also told him not to sign any agreement if someone asks him to do so. Hyun-cha awkwardly replied that he would not sign anything and that he was not interested. The security guard also felt the awkwardness and said it was all good. He also told the security guard that he was a bit tired and he wanted to be alone. The security guard understood and apologized for disturbing them in the night. The security guard also bought an orange juice for Hyun-cha as an act of kindness. But Hyun-cha was suspicious about it. The security guard handed him the orange juice and said it was nothing more than a welcome gift. He continued to walk down the hallway to his office. Hyun-cha did not get back into his room and made sure the security guard left the floor, as he was suspicious of him. He held on to the welcome gift as he felt something was off. But just as he was about to enter his room, he heard the door next to his room creak. He heard a woman coming out of her room as he was talking to her mom through her mobile phone. A young, fair, and blonde-haired woman was wearing her heels as she was telling her mother that she would return to her home if the audition didn't work out. She also promised her mom that it would be the last time and told her that she had a really good feeling about the new opportunity. Her mother was upset, as the sponsor was male, and thought her daughter would do something dirty. But she had had enough, and she hung up the call as Hyun-cha continued to observe her from his room entrance. She glanced at him as she passed by his apartment. Hyun-cha was still feeling socially awkward, as he did not know what to say or how to react. She swiftly turned away and she continued to walk away as his heel taps echoed through the floor's corridor. As she was walking, she realized she was hungry, and she might even starve to death. But just as she was walking by, she noticed her nose started to bleed. But unlike the security guard, she blamed it on her imbalanced diet to maintain her beauty. Hyun-cha was silently observing her until she left the floor and remained silent. But Hyun-cha was completely stunned by her beauty. He even wondered if she was an actress and wagered a bet with himself that she had plastic surgery to be that beautiful. After she left, Hyun-cha quickly closed the door and entered his room. The glimpses of his memories started to haunt him, as sometimes he wondered about the same thing. He always thought his life would have been different if he had not offered his hand. But it was Hyun-cha who was dreaming about a remnant of his past, as his eyes were completely tearing up. He slowly woke up from his nightmare as he realized it was all a dream. He was lying in his room, completely depressed and filled with negative energy. He tried to distract himself, as he did not want to think about that bad memory. Some lights were glowing in the apartment, even though it was night, and Hyun-cha's room did not glow at all. In order to pass the time, he started to watch a series on his computer. But Hyun-cha found the drama was too boring, and he was just watching it for the sake of passing the time. But he heard a thud from the walls, and he was able to hear someone speak to their mother. But Hyun-cha also heard the tapping noise from the same heels that the woman wore and walked over to the corridor. Hyun-cha quickly realized it was the woman who entered the floor, as the tapping noises were clearly audible even though she was in the next room. The tapping noises continued down the corridor while the drama was still running on his computer. He quickly paused the series to hear what was going on. The taps continued as he wondered where she was coming from. He observed that the tapping noises intensified near his door, implying she was near his door. The tapping noise then shifted near the main walls of his house, implying she was heading to her room. He was also able to hear her entering her house through the walls. Her door creaked open and she quickly closed it. Hyun-cha was completely confused as to what was going on. He was confused as to how he was able to hear everything clearly. She continued to walk into her house, and he was able to clearly hear the thumping noises. She walked across her room, and he was able to clearly identify where she was heading with her walking speed and her thumping noises. She started to complain about her diet, as she was not happy about starving herself, and showed frustration with the talent agent, as he did not mention it would be that hard. Hyun-cha realized that the walls were so thin, and he was clearly able to hear even when the lady was speaking to herself. But just as he was listening to her, he suddenly had a thought of doing something. He was hesitant to do it as he was feeling awkward about it. But he did not think twice, and he stood up, and he headed towards the wall where he was able to hear her voice from her room. He then placed his ears against the walls and tried to hear whatever she was discussing and what she was doing. As he continued to listen, he heard thumping noises, which were caused by her walking motion across her room. He was getting flustered as he continued to listen and stalk the woman as she placed something. Suddenly, Hyun-cha heard a cat meowing at the woman. She rattles at her kitty, as she is envious about the fact that the cat gets to eat whatever it wants, while the owner gets to starve. She was also upset about the fact that she was so spoiled, while Hyun-cha continued to observe and listen to her from his room. He was feeling shy, and he understood that she had a cat to cope with her loneliness. But just as he was thinking, his face turned even redder when she told her kitty that she was going to take a shower. He was completely overwhelmed by it, and he quickly backed off from the wall as he felt shy thinking about it. She was awkwardly silent as he was still thinking about what the woman told her cat. But in order to distract himself, he quickly tapped the spacebar, continuing the series and washing off all the lust from his head. The series resumed, with drama unfolding between a couple. Hyun-cha was bored and tried to focus and get his concentration over the series, and not to think about the woman next door. But he could not get over her beauty. Even when he tried to distract himself by focusing on the series, he was still thinking about her. Despite all his efforts to keep his head straight, an image of her bathing naked flashed before his eyes. He was literally enchanted by her beauty, and he could not contain himself from thinking and imagining how she would look while she was bathing. Hyun-cha blushed heavily as she was in his headspace. But having morals for himself, he knew it was wrong for him to think like that, and he quickly tried to shake off his lustful feelings for the lady. Even though the day was about to end, Hyun-cha still did not unpack everything, as the cardboard boxes still lay there, completely packed, and the only thing he assembled was his computer setup. But instead of unpacking, Hyun-cha was literally dreaming about the woman next door. No matter how hard he tried, he could not shake her off his head. He understood that the girl next door wanted to be famous. Even though he was not happy about moving into this place, he now had second thoughts that moving to this place was not all bad. But just as he was thinking, the entire room started to tremble as if an earthquake had just hit the land. Hyun-cha looked up above as he heard a musical instrument that was causing this earthquake-like commotion. It was coming from the room above him as the whole wall and the room vibrated to the commotion. Hyun-cha was enraged by it as he could not figure out what exactly was going on. But just as the commotion continued, he understood that it was a familiar sound that he had heard before. He understood it was from a bass guitar. The lady from the room above was blasting her bass guitar through the speaker at full volume as she continued to strum the guitar. It was as if she were composing a song based on her hunger, as she sang that she wanted to eat steak frog. She continued to strum her bass guitar with full volume as she was composing her freestyle music. She riffed her freestyle with rock and roll tuning. Hyun-cha was not having it. He wanted his room to be silent and peaceful while the neighbor from above was causing all this commotion. Just as he had second thoughts about the place for not being bad, this commotion made him uncomfortable, making him stick to his initial thoughts about the place. That this place sucks. The sun shone bright upon the city, and the wind was breezing through the city. It has been a week since he moved into the green home apartments. His diet had completely collapsed, as there were a lot of pizza boxes nearby. Hyun-cha did not feel well because of this fast food diet for the entire week, but it did not bother him at all. He was playing his video game as he was munching on his chips, as he had already made up his mind to die, and it was not like he wanted to live long. He was completely focused on the video game as the music from the video game popped up and was ringing through his speakers. Since he was always on his video game, his character was level 99, the video game cap. But while he was playing, he noticed that his online friend had been sitting over there for over 5 days and hadn't moved a single inch. He also noticed the witch class lady who had been standing still for the last week. Hyun-cha was wondering if they had gotten a stroke while playing that video game. But just as she was thinking about her, the avatar moved a little. Hyun-cha noticed it, and he thought she might have moved because it was nothing but a keyboard macro to not get kicked off for inactivity in the server. But his focus was averted elsewhere in the video game interface. He noticed that one of the members of his party, with the username Gaydri, was talking in the chat, saying he had been hearing voices and nose bleeding every day and was asking if he had to go see the doctor. He was even worried if it was a tumor. Hyun-cha was intrigued by this, and he started to read further into Gaydri's messages. Gadri further sent a message saying the voice keeps telling him to kill his mother and his father, and also it keeps ringing in his ears as it is driving him crazy. But the lobby members ignored his messages, and this enraged Gadri. He even suggested that he would kill his mother and his father while they were asleep with his kitchen knife. But the lobby members finally understood that he was just trying to seek attention, and they made fun of him. Gadri's message ended abruptly as he typed random letters followed by a continuous L typed over the chat. But the lobby members did not bother with his attention-seeking and continued to make fun of him for being corny. Hyun-cha was honestly disappointed by his team's lobby, as they were seeking attention for no reason. His whole room trembled as the bass guitar shook again. But the riff was louder than the previous time, and enraged by this, Hyun-cha looked up with frustration. She continued to strum her bass guitar while he was not happy about it. He woke up from his seat, wondering why someone would start strumming their guitar that early in the morning, waking up the whole neighborhood. He could not stand it anymore, and he dialed the security office. The keypad rang and beeped continuously for some time, as it did not connect with the security office. The ringing continued, but no one attended the call Hyun-cha made. Hyun-cha realized that there was no one at the office to attend to his call. In the meantime, the terrace of the apartment was silent and peaceful as the breeze breezed through the apartment. The terrace consisted of all the air conditioner ducts and the single-way entrance to the terrace with only one gate protecting it. A middle-aged man tried to enter the terrace, but the gate did not budge even a little bit. The gate clanked as it was restrained by the mechanism. The man wondered who and why they would lock the door, with a cigarette in his mouth. He did not know what to do, and he came up with an idea. The man lit up his cigarette there and then and blamed it on whoever locked the door, as he was not bothered at all. He exhaled the smoke as he took a puff from his cigarette. While he was puffing, he heard a girl's voice from behind as she continued to say it was a non-smoking building. The man turned slowly, as he did not know or had never even heard the voice of the person. He thought he was caught red-handed by the building's owner. He saw a red-haired woman right behind him, who looked almost like a teenager. She even said that she always wondered who had been leaving their cigarette butts every day, and she even addressed the man as Mr. Mobster, since he had scars over his face. But the man was facing some serious allegations of smoking every day, and inside the apartment as well, as he never done either of them before. And before he could even address that, he said he was not a thug. The red-haired woman asked what he was if he was not a thug. With a bright smile on his face, he said he was a good fella. But the red-haired girl found it so lame. After a while, she told him it was fine for him to smoke on the roof, and she even pointed at the ashtray over the roof, and she also added that the entire corridor smelled like his cigarettes. But the man pointed out that the door was locked, and he could not go up even if he wanted to. The red-haired girl even looked behind him to verify if the door was really locked and wondered why they would lock the door. The man even had the same question running through his mind, but after some time he asked what she was doing up there. But the girl stayed silent, as she did not know what to tell him or how to manage him. While she was thinking about what to say, she held her lighter firmly with her left hand as she tried to form an answer in her head. But the man noticed what was in her hand. The man yelled at her for preaching about smoking with him, despite being underage herself. She quickly ran down the steps before he could ask any more questions. She rushed down the stairs as she yelled at the man to mind his own business. The man told her that he was going to tell her brother, but she tried to plead with him by bribing him with a burger, while the man rejected her offer. But just as they were descending the stairs, the man told her that he would have to ask the security to unlock the door, to which the girl replied that no one was at the security office that day. As they continued to descend, he wondered what might have happened to the old man. Meanwhile, Hyun-cha was again haunted by the remnants of his past, as his father was picking up a fight with someone for a settlement. He was violently shaking a man, asking him who did that to his son. His father even ordered the man to get him there as soon as possible. But just as he was shaking the man violently, he heard someone open the door behind him, sliding across the room. A man with a black shirt entered the room as he was looking at his father from outside. His father turned back to see who entered the room. He was shocked to see an uninvited guest. While all this was a dream, a deep, monotonous voice rang through his head, asking who would protect him anymore, since his whole family died. He woke up to the nightmare again, with tear-filled eyes and with a heavy heart. Hyun-cha sat straight and wondered what just happened, and realized it was a dream. He took his mobile phone and checked what the time was. But just as he took his mobile, he saw a notification from an unknown number, as it mentioned that they left his package by the door since no one answered, and the security office was empty as well. He quickly got out of his bed and he walked towards the door to get his order, as he thought it was the ramen that he ordered. But when he went out, he saw his package was completely opened, and the corridor was such a fine mess. He noticed some of the ramen packets were missing and thought it might be someone's doing. He observed that there was a lot of garbage spilt over the corridor hallway. He noticed his ramen cakes were opened, and it was spilled all over the hall and were leading towards the blonde woman's house. The cover, the seasonings, and the cakes were completely torn apart and were spilt across the entrance of her room. Seeing this, Hyun-cha did not know how to react, as he could still not process what was going on. He knew it was because someone rummaged through his packet and thought it might be the cat's doing since the door was wide open. But just as he peeked through the door, something caught his attention. He saw blood spilt all over the floor, along with his ramen cakes and cover across the floor. He noticed there were blood stains starting from his package, leading into the woman's room. Seeing that blood, he thought it might be because of the nosebleed that the woman suffered a few days ago. But since the volume of blood was high, it seemed a little suspicious. Filled with curiosity, he decided to peep through her house. But he noticed the room was completely messed up, and he heard some slurping and chomping noises across her house. The ramen cakes were open as the chomping intensified. Hyun-cha thought it was her and wondered why she would chomp on his ramen, which was also uncooked. But just as the chomping continued, a bracelet was thrown across the room, which fell in front of him. Hyun-cha noticed the bracelet, but upon closer inspection, it did not look like a bracelet. Since the light was minimal in the room, Hyun-cha struggled to see what was thrown in front of him. He saw it was her cat's collar, completely filled with blood, and it was torn violently. A spine-chilling realization struck Hyun-cha as he realized what was going on. His body completely froze out of fear. But just as he was seeing the collar, something else caught his attention. He noticed a withered, eerie hand reaching out to the blood-stained collar of her cat. The hand was nothing like human, and it was filled with bloodlust. The hand quickly grabbed the collar. It swiftly pulled it in as blood was dripping from it. Hyun-cha was totally stunned, and primal fear struck his spine. The slurping continued after picking up the collar. Within a few seconds, it spat the collar across the room as if it was licking and slurping through the blood that was across the collar. The collar landed over the other end of the room. Hyun-cha realized whatever that was inside was totally filled with bloodlust, as it did not want to waste even a single drop of blood, even across the collar. He slowly backed out of the room, as he did not want to get its attention by making any unnecessary noises. He almost came out, making sure he closed the door slowly without making any creaking noise from the door. But just as he was backing out, he stepped onto the ramen packet, which was spread across the floor. The cover made a rustling noise, which was louder while the entire landscape was filled with silence. Hyun-cha realized he was cooked. A creepy, eerie, and spine-chilling voice emerged from the room, wondering if there was something to eat. Just as he heard the voice, he quickly took a long step across the floor. But he made sure not to make any more noise, as it would rush at him at any moment. Within a few long steps, he quickly reached his room, as he was terrified of that creepy voice. He instantly latched his door and then entered his room. He slowly backed off from the door, wondering what exactly happened. He slowly took steps, as the walls were thin and the creature might hear him. But just as he was moving back, he noticed something below. He noticed that he had a small gap between the floor and the bed, enough for him to hide there. He wasted no time, and he went below the space to take cover. He made sure not to make any noise, as he would be heard. He was unsure what or who that was and what their intention was. But he knew one thing, that it was not human. Clicking noises started to emerge from the other room as it started to walk across her home. Her door creaked open. But the creaking noise became less intense, and it slowly continued to walk across the corridor. The footsteps were scary and louder, as the floorboard made a clacking noise. The clacking noise continued across his door. The creature moved slowly and crept through the corridor, and he was able to hear it. Clacking continued as it appeared till his door. But silence filled the room, as there were no more clacking noises. He bent down even more to see the entirety of the door. Hyun-cha was instilled with fear as someone, or something, banged on his door and pressed his calling bell. The night broke out as the sky was filled with obsidian black. Amidst this night, he was walking up towards the green home apartment as he was talking to his friend on the phone, while discussing his overtime work. As he was heading towards the company, he was telling his friend that he picked the wrong company, about how he does the same thing every single day. He was also telling his friend that time was not on their side because of the work culture at his company. But just as he was walking, he realized that the connection had been lost, and the mobile phone continued to beep, notifying him that the line was not established properly. The man also noticed that the connection was lost even when he tried to reconnect. He tried once again and hoped that the connection issue would have been fixed. He stood there and waited until the connection was properly established. but the line remained empty as it was ringing. Suddenly, a loud beep message emerged from his mobile phone and he wondered what might be going on. He did not know what to do, as this was the first time something had ever happened like that. He held onto his mobile phone and wondered if the issue was with the network's base station itself. But the beeping noise still persisted while something was closing in on the man. It was closing the distance at a very rapid pace, almost at the pace of an automobile. The man swiftly turned around to see if something was behind him, but he noticed nothing, and it was just the breeze. Upon the road, his shadow was cast across the lane as he was standing at the other end of the light. Just as he was figuring out what the rustling noise was, a shadow emerged from behind him, and it continued to grow beside his shadow. This implied that it was closing the distance with the man, almost sneaking up behind him. The man noticed the shadow on the road. There was something behind him. He slowly turned back to see who was sneaking up behind him. But in order to see who or what it was, he had to look up, as it was not human, and it was abnormally tall. He was horrified at the sight of the creature, which sneaked up behind him. The man did not know how to react, as he froze in fear and did not even cut the call as he held his mobile phone firmly. Within moments, blood splattered all over the place, as the man let go of the mobile phone while the beeping continued. The mobile phone fell onto the ground as blood was spilt all across the road. The phone's display cracked as his life was instantly ripped away from him. Beeping did not stop as something continued to rummage through his body. His clothes were filled with blood, as the slash was pretty deep. Meanwhile, his entire upper body was filled with blood. But just as the beeping continued, something held his lifeless body firmly. The call then connects to an automatic message as the creature drags his body across the road. While the message said that his call could not be completed at that time and to call later, his body was leaking blood as it was being dragged. The message continued as the creature almost dragged him out of the lane. It was dragging him towards the green home apartment itself, as the mobile phone hung up the call by asking him to call the technical support if he wanted any help. He was dragged out completely, as the road was filled with bloodstains, and his bag lay on the floor in a pool of blood. Meanwhile, Hyun Cha remained under the bed, panicking about what was going on. He tried to gather his sanity and questioned his reality, wondering what that was. He even questioned if he was sane anymore, and also wondered if he was seeing things. He tried to remember what he saw in the room. Hyun Cha clearly remembers the inhuman hand with abnormally long fingers reaching out to the cat's collar. He knew he was not insane, and he knew that it was definitely not a human. Hyun Cha realized that it must be some sort of bloodthirsty monster. Just as he was wondering what it was, the monster pressed the calling bell, alerting Hyun Cha. Hyun Cha was literally shivering out of fear, as he did not know what to do in that situation. He quickly covered his mouth to keep from making any unnecessary noises due to fear or to breathe heavily. But it could not help him with his trembling, as it was purely out of fear. He remained under the bed without making any noise across the room. But he realized monsters do not possess the intellect to ring a doorbell. But Hyun Cha heard the voice of the woman, who asked if someone was inside his room. This quickly got Hyun Cha's attention, as he was confused about what was happening. She then tells him that her cat went missing, and she says someone broke into her place. She then demanded help from Hyun Cha, as she did not know where or what else she could do about it. This made him realize that the monsters were able to talk as well, but he remembered it was a creepy, eerie voice rather than the lady's voice as the voice continued to ask for help. Hyun Cha even wondered if he was hallucinating because of all the odd occurrences. He quietly moved out of the gap as he went near the desk in order to see through the door cam, but he could not see from that distance. Thus, Hyun Cha quietly emerged from the space, making sure not to make any unnecessary noise. He then observed through the door cam. He was visibly confused and remained silent as he could not figure out what was going on. But he was shocked to see what was at his doorstep. He saw the same blonde-haired fair woman crying as she was startled by something in the vicinity. She looked both ways to make sure that nothing creepy was present in the corridor hallway. She made sure to look at the end of the corridor as well, as she was not sure about what was happening after seeing all the blood on the floor. Hyun Cha was totally surprised to see her. He did not know what to say as he was stammering through his words and was confused about the situation. Hyun Cha thought he had gone insane, and he thought he was going crazy. He finally pressed the calling camcorder mic while still wondering what he saw. He awkwardly addressed her, but he made sure to keep his guard up and be aware of the situation. She was finally relieved to hear his voice through the door cam's microphone. Hyun Cha was still confused about what was going on, and he asked the same of that woman. But desperate for survival, she screamed for help. But Hyun Cha was confused as to how he could help her. She suggested he call and inform the police, and she even stated that she could not remember But when she woke up, she mentioned that her door was wide open and her cat was gone. Hyun-cha was shaken to the core by this, as she continued to say that there was blood and empty ramen packets lying around everywhere in her house. Hyun-cha did not know how to handle the situation, and he advised her to calm herself first. He then asked the woman about her mobile phone, to which the woman replied that she could not find it anywhere, and maybe she had lost it. Hyun-cha remained silent, but she reminded him to call the police and report the incident on her behalf. But Hyun-cha was skeptical about the whole situation, and he asked her why she didn't ask the security for help, and he also told her he would not be much help in this case. Both Hyun-cha and the lady remained silent, as it was more awkward for both of them. But Hyun-cha was suspicious about one thing and asked the woman to show her arm in front of the camera. But the woman was genuinely confused after hearing Hyun-cha's request. He even repeated and asked her to show her arm in front of the camera so he could see it. But she could not understand why he was asking it out of nowhere and asked him why. But Hyun-cha was persistent and asked her to show her arm in front of the camera so he could see it and verify if he was hallucinating or not, and to check if she was really a human or not. But the lady remained silent after hearing Hyun-cha's request. Hyun-cha also remained silent, as he did not know what or why she was acting in a weird way. But within moments, the lady screamed right in front of the camera and demanded that Hyun-cha open the door. His entire body froze and shivered out of fear after witnessing something through his door cam. Her face suddenly drained, and her eyes went completely hollow as she yelled at Hyun-cha to open the door, or else she would forcefully enter the room. He was horrified after witnessing this gore at his door cam. Blood started to ooze from her nose and her mouth as she continued to yell that she was starving to death and she needed food. He could not believe what he was seeing through his doorbell cam. Just as he was watching, her voice slowly became creepy and eerie as her eyes widened, as if they were going to pop out of her face. But just as she was trying to break in, the bass guitar shook his room once again. He looked up and wondered what was going on, as the strumming was very violent this time. The tuning and bass were so enormous that they caught his attention even when there was a monster at his doorstep. But just as he looked up, he knew what was going to happen. He suddenly looked at the doorbell cam and witnessed horror as the lady spilt blood across every single part of her face. Hyun-cha was completely shocked, as he did not know what else to do or how to react. This caught the zombified version of the lady's attention as she looked up at the ceiling as well. She understood that there were other humans in the apartment who resided right above Hyun-cha's house. Her face crept up above the ceiling, and she was happy that she found her food once again. Without even hesitating for a moment, she rushed in towards the staircase, as she was completely overwhelmed by her hunger. The footsteps were so quick and inhuman that they were loud as well as fast. The creature rushed towards the corner, desperately trying to find a way up into that person's room. After taking the corner, it found the opening to the staircase, and it rushed towards the staircase door as well. It forcefully opened the door and started to climb the staircase while filled with bloodlust. It effortlessly ran across the floor to reach the staircase. Without even stopping for a moment to catch breath, the creature immediately crossed the stairs and climbed with ease, very quickly. Hyun-cha observed that the zombified lady was attracted to the bass guitar's commotion, which made him confused as to what he should do. He knew whoever was strumming the guitar was cooked. Hyun-cha could not do anything in order to stop the person from playing their guitar. He looked up at the ceiling as the bass guitar continued, and he realized that calling out to them or tapping their ceiling would never work. He felt sad, and he was hoping that whoever was playing would eventually stop playing. Hyun-cha was getting annoyed as he could not save the person from their impending doom, which was approaching them. But it did not stop, and it was only getting worse and louder. Hyun-cha was annoyed, and he screamed and asked them to stop, but the bass guitar was still producing noise. He quickly turned around to find any prop that would help him fight the monster. He found a mopping stick lying in one corner of the room. He swiftly grabbed it and he ran near the door. But before he could exit, he knew what he was doing, and he stepped onto the mopping part of the stick. He twisted the mop and broke the flat part, which left him with only the stick part of his mop. He kicked open his door as he held onto the mopping stick firmly, as he could use it to defend himself, but he could not find anything or anyone around the house or on the floor. Hyun-cha noticed that the floor was filled with blood, as there was a trail of blood that led exactly to the floor above him. He was pretty sure that it headed towards the stairs, as he saw it clearly from his doorbell cam. He was still having second thoughts about his decision to come out and confront it, but he had his own morals and he stuck to them. In order to save that person, he yelled for the creature to come down and face him, providing a distraction for the neighbor upstairs. He noticed that the door to the staircase was wide open, hoping that anything could come and strike him down within moments. Just as he was observing through the staircase door, He noticed that there were some noises coming from far inside the stairs. But Hyun-cha did not lower his guard, as he held onto his mop stick firmly in order to fight the creature. But silence filled in once again, as Hyun-cha was wondering if it was really coming to get him. Within moments of silence, he heard a firm step coming from the staircase. This startled Hyun-cha, as his body started to tremble in fear even though he was determined to save that person. He pointed his pole at the door, with the intention of impaling it if the monster charges towards him and leaps at him, making use of its momentum against itself. But even though his plan was quite an effective one, he knew it was practically impossible to pull something like that, even with luck in his favor. The steps intensified as it approached the staircase door. His body started to tremble in fear, even though he was determined to save that person from that creature as he held his stick firmly. He leveled his pole at the door, aiming to drive it straight through the metal. The quiet rushed back in, heavy with the weight of Hyun-cha's fear that his end was finally approaching. Fear finally took physical form, setting his limbs to a steady rhythmic tremble. Since the staircase door was wide open, he was half hoping something would burst through and end it all in an instant. The staircase lights suddenly flicked on. A remnant of his past haunted him, where he was beaten to a pulp by his school bully with a wooden stick. Hyun-cha coughed up blood as he had no idea why everything was happening to him. But the bully had a good reason for all the beatings he caused for Hyun-cha. He was enraged by this, as he continued to cough blood while he angrily stared at his bully. But this hurt the bully's ego, as he was surprised to see that fierce look he had in his eyes and was told he was really going to beat him to a pulp. He then called one of Hyun-cha's friends, addressing him as Four Eyes as he wore spectacles. His friend was genuinely confused as to why he was calling him. But the bully had other plans for him. He ordered the guy to beat Hyun-cha, as it was his turn to beat him. Since the guy hesitated, the bully asked if he had gotten too close to Hyun-cha and asked if he was his best friend. But the guy was genuinely feeling empathy for Hyun-cha. The bully pointed to others, mentioning they were also his friends. This meant that every one of them had beaten Hyun-cha to a pulp on the basis of his bully's orders. Hyun-cha felt embarrassed, as he could not do anything about it, and felt powerless, as he could not do anything about it. The bully then handed over the wooden stick to the boy and politely told him it was okay if he could not do it, and also told him he was not going to force him. Just as he held the stick, the bully went near his ear and asked whom he hung out with. But the boy did not say anything, as he held the wooden stick firmly while the bully smiled widely. The boy gathered all his courage and stood against the fallen Hyun-cha, as he did not know what else to do. Hyun-cha understood his situation and did not react at all, and did not beg or say anything as he just observed the boy. The boy closed his eyes and apologized for what he was about to commit beforehand, and he slammed the stick in Hyun-cha's head. He quickly snapped out of his memory, and since the staircase door was wide open, he was half hoping something would burst through and end it all in an instant. The quiet rushed back in, heavy with the weight of Hyun-cha's fear that his end was finally approaching. His body started to tremble in fear, even though he was determined to save that person from that creature as he held his stick firmly. The quiet rushed back in, heavy with the weight of Hyun-cha's fear that his end was finally approaching. Just as he continued to observe the door, he realized, just like in his past, he still did not know his place, as he was challenging something that was far beyond anything that's human. His hands continued to tremble as he knew he was not a hero himself. As he was lost in his own thoughts, a leg appeared through the door which almost entered the floor by itself. This startled Hyun-cha, as his body started to tremble in fear even though he was determined to save that person. But it was just the same man who tried to enter the balcony earlier that day. He entered the elevator as he was complaining about how the elevator was also not working. The man entered and noticed Hyun-cha as he was wondering why he was staring at him. Hyun-cha was visibly confused about the man's sudden appearance while the creature just went to the floor above. The man continued to observe Hyun-cha, who was shaking due to fear. While Hyun-cha stared back at the middle-aged man with scars on his face, wondering about the whereabouts of the monster. The man found Hyun to be suspicious, as he asked what he was doing with a mop stick, staring at the staircase door's entrance. While Hyun-cha was genuinely confused about what he was talking about, the man also added that he does not work with the thugs and asked Hyun-cha if Mr. Kim sent him. Hyun-cha, who was already overwhelmed with all the things that had happened, did not know what the man was talking about and said no. But the man later revealed that he was just fooling around while recognizing him to be the new tenant of room number 1410. He walked up to Hyun-cha while he was asking if someone tried to rob him, as he was holding onto the pole for his self-defense. But something else caught the man's attention. He looked at something that was spilt on the floor as he was talking to Hyun-cha. He noticed there was a large amount of blood spilt across the floor right outside his room. The man asked Hyun-cha if it was a bloodstain, knowing something was wrong. Hyun-cha knew he misread the situation. The man continued to analyze the situation as he saw the door next to his room was wide open, and his ramen packet was scattered all over the floor, while there were traces of blood as well. He read the room and understood what was up. Hyun-cha understood that the man might mistake him for the one who was causing the trouble and kill or injure someone gravely. The man stared at Hyun-cha with a killer instinct and asked what that was all about. Hyun-cha, who was already overwhelmed by all the commotion, replied that it was not what he thought and stammered, as he did not know where he should start. He continued to come up against the frightened Hyun-cha, asking him what he did to his neighbor, while Hyun-cha tried his level best to explain what was going on. But the man had had enough, and he demanded answers from Hyun-cha. He was just flustered by his aura and yelled at him, and asked if he had seen a monster moments ago. But the man was just confused as to what Hyun-cha was asking about. Hyun-cha stood awkwardly, as he did not know what else to ask or to say. The man was genuinely confused and asked him what he was talking about. Hyun-cha gathered all his sanity and replied that he saw a monster heading upstairs to kill the girl who was using a bass guitar. While the man was standing still, Hyun continued to ask if he had seen the monster. The man simply smiled and asked if there was a monster in that apartment. Hyun-cha affirmed that there was a monster nearby, and it just looked like the girl who lived next to his door. The man had enough of his story and clenched his fists and tried to hit Hyun-cha as he was just blabbering. But suddenly, blood trickled down Hyun-cha's nose. Unlike others, the bleeding was heavy for Hyun-cha, as it instantly leaked through his nose at a very rapid pace. The man who tried to hit him was genuinely confused, as he could not understand what was going on. Hyun-cha suddenly fell to the ground as he slowly lost consciousness. The man was wondering how and why he was faltering before he could even hit him. Hyun-cha fell heavily on the floor as he dropped his stick, while the man was wondering what happened exactly. Since he did not know his name, the man addressed him as Apartment 1410 and tried to wake him up. Blood instantly leaked and poured over the floor as the man tried to wake him up by shouting at him. Hyun-cha slowly lost consciousness as he fell on the ground. He could no longer hear what the man was saying, and his vision started to black out as well. Somewhere within his consciousness, he heard a voice within him, saying he would not tell anyone if asked if he could be a little more honest with him. The voice emerged from a cancerous tumor residing somewhere within his consciousness, as it identified itself to be another Hyun-cha within himself, and told Hyun-cha that they both are the same but different. It also told Hyun-cha that they are different but also the same, and disclosed that it was on his side. While the voice was emerging within him, multiple eyes across the tumor started to grow and opened their eyes. Its eyes were open wide as it asked what it was that Hyun-cha desired and wanted the most. Hyun-cha opened his eyes, waking up to reality. He realized he was lying in his house, with his mobile phone across the bed. He woke up disheveled and remained silent for a moment, wondering if what he had experienced was a dream. But ignoring his voice, he thought it was all nothing but one hell of a dream. He looked over his mobile phone to check what the time was and everything. He pressed the power button to check. But Hyun-cha realized that the battery was low and his phone actually got switched off. He tried to turn on his computer and press the CPU's power button. The Windows booted up, and he started to surf the internet, wondering what happened. He tried to play a video game, as he thought it would help him distract himself from thinking about the nightmare that he had just experienced. But the server was unable to load the game, as a message popped up saying it was unable to connect to the current server. He realized that it was the server's fault instead of the network. He quickly closed the video game and tried to open another application. He tried to open the first-person shooter video game. Simultaneously, he tried to open another video game. But the first-person shooter game also displayed that it was unable to load due to a server error. Likewise, the same message appeared for the other game. Confused by this, Hyun-cha was completely confused as to what was happening and wondered if all of them had gone on a strike together. He realized there were no more video games, and he tried to focus on the internet. Hyun-cha realized that the internet was working perfectly all right, but not the video games. But he also noticed that the internet was much slower than it usually was. But something else caught his attention on the web page. He saw a separate Dropbox, displaying early symptoms of monsterization. He dragged his mouse and clicked on the Dropbox. The Dropbox was authentic and displayed all the instructions on what should be done for the monster outbreak. Hyun-cha was completely confused as to what was going on. But just as he was wondering, he finally understood what was going on. He understood there was a monster outbreak in the city. He quickly stood up from his chair as if he was rushing somewhere. He swiftly opened the screens to check on the city. The sunlight was so bright that he could not see what was going on in the city. But he gained his vision over the city as he understood what was up. Hyun-cha was stunned by what he witnessed. His face froze, and he realized that it was all real. The chaos, just like the fictional ones that he had seen on television or in video games, had finally manifested itself into reality. The 18-year-old high school student Hyun-cha was all alone in his world. There was a lot of smoke in the surroundings of the apartment. He realized that humanity was on the brink of extinction as chaos erupted all over the place. The entire city was burning, marking that already half of humanity had been erased. This shook Hyun-cha to the core. He realized the kitty's blood-stained collar was red. The monstrous hand was real. The zombified neighbor girl was real. And the man whom he had encountered was also real. He realized it was not a dream, and it was all real. Just as he was thinking and processing everything, his nose started to bleed once again. A man was standing with an orange juice in his hand. The lady who stayed above Hyun-cha's room was looking at the orange juice, filled with confusion. It was the same security guard whom Hyun-cha encountered before, offering an orange juice bottle to her as he continued to tell her that he would be at this security office if she needed any help. She accepted the gift and thanked the security guard for his kind gesture. But instead of letting him go, she called him once again. She politely asked the security if the buildings had soundproof walls. Sometime later, she lit her cigarette in her house. As she was taking a puff, she was looking at something. She was looking at the new song to cover and found it lame, as it was not her style. Since it was not her style, she figured out that she would just cut the corners. She instantly put out her cigarette in her ashtray as she got into work. But after putting it out, she realized it was the last one she had in the pack. Without any further delay, she quickly took off her guitar cover. She wore it upon her shoulders and headed towards her music school. She closed the door, and she left with enthusiasm. She whimsically walked through the floor's corridor hallway when she noticed someone else at the other end of the hallway. She saw an old lady with a child trolley in her hand. She noticed the old lady and continued to observe her from a distance. They both were waiting for the same lift. The lady asked her if she had just moved in, to which the young girl affirmed and said that she had just moved into room number 1510. With a bright smile upon her face, she greeted the lady and gave her regards. While she was talking, the lady suddenly tried to calm her baby, as she thought the young lady had started the kid. She even tried to put the baby to sleep by gently moving the trolley back and forth. The young woman asked the lady how old her baby was. The lady told her that it was a girl by addressing the baby as a princess, and she was 12 months old. But when the young lady tried to take a look at the baby, she noticed something was wrong. There was no baby in the carriage. This confused the young woman, as it was so strange for her to stroll with an empty carriage. The old lady even asked her if she was lovely. But in order to prevent any further awkwardness, she told her that she was absolutely right, and she looked absolutely stunning. The lift finally arrived on the 15th floor. The old lady entered the lift with her baby while she was wondering what was wrong and why she wasn't entering the lift along with her. But overcome with awkwardness, the young woman told the lady that she had forgotten her wallet. But the lady showed generosity by telling the young woman that she would hold the lift for her. The young woman refused her offer politely and insisted that the lady continue, as she would take the next one. The lift door closed as the lady continued to pamper her non-existent baby. The young woman was confused as to what exactly just happened. She thought something must be wrong with her, as the carriage was empty and had no baby in it, yet she was hallucinating as if there was a girl child inside the carriage. Just as she was wondering about her, a voice was heard beside her, which also felt the same amount of empathy for her. It was a young man who was on his way to his office. The young man also added that a year ago, when the lady was not paying attention, the baby stroller slid down the road and the baby unfortunately passed away. The girl was shocked as he also added that ever since that incident, she had become like that. The girl showed empathy for her, as it was so saddening to see. But the young man added that the Lord sometimes gives everyone a hard time to overcome, and also said that a person should not be criticized or be an object of fear for not being able to overcome such difficulties. The girl found his intellect to be quite astounding and agreed with him. The man also added that it was the God's will that did all the doing. But the girl was not sure about that. The man later introduced himself as Jae-hun from room number 1506 and asked if she was the new tenant of room number 1510. She was reluctant to shake his hand as she continued to observe his hand. The man patiently waited with a warm smile to indicate that he meant no harm and just wanted to establish a good connection. But the man later realized that he had gotten ahead of himself and apologized if she was offended by his comments. The young girl replied that it was nothing like what he thought. She did not extend her hand because it smelled like cigarettes and introduced herself as Jisoo to Jaehoon. Both Jaehoon and Jisoo continued to travel down the elevator. Both remained silent as Jaehoon noticed something. He observed the bag she was carrying and asked Jisoo if she played the guitar, to which Jisoo smiles brightly and says that it is a bass guitar. Jaehoon, having zero knowledge about it, just agreed, while Jisoo asked about Jaehoon. What was his profession and where did he work? Jaehoon replied that he was a Korean teacher, and since it was Sunday, he was heading to church at that moment. Jisoo noticed his devotion towards the god and asked if he was a devout Christian, to which Jaehoon smiled, affirming that he was indeed a devout Christian. They both exited the building at the same moment as they both were heading out, but Jaehoon headed towards his car as their destinations were different. Jisoo noticed and observed a lot from Jaehoon, as she found him to be gentle, kind, and good-looking. She found Jaehoon to be totally opposite to Haerang. A memory flashed before her eyes as she was walking down the road with her fellow musician, Haerang. She was sharing a beautiful moment with Haerang as she was smiling brightly when she was with him. But she thought something else. Despite Jaehoon being kind and gentle, she found Haerang to be even cooler. But just as she was thinking and walking down the road, Hyun-cha was walking uphill as he was heading towards the green home apartment. They crossed their paths without even noticing each other. But Hyun-cha took a look to the side as something flew past him. It was at this moment when the lawnmower's blade struck the tree that was in front of him after hitting the stone accidentally.